Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. The title is Why Supply Chain Convergence Matters. This is a partnership between Microsoft and GEP. I thank you, everyone, for coming to today's webinar. At the end of today's webinar, we'll have a Q&A session, so please get your question sent in the chat space. I am Alex Dong. I'm a Director of Product Marketing at GEP. I've been in the supply chain space for about 2 decades as a practitioner, a strategist, and a solution provider. And I'm very passionate about supply chain technology for the future. And I'd love to connect any one of you on the call via LinkedIn. Supply chain convergence is actually not a new topic. What is interesting is that it really matters today, given the environment we are in. So why is that? That's our topic to discuss in this webinar. And I believe the audience will find some very valuable insights to take away. So with me today, we have 2 fantastic supply chain leaders as our guest speakers. So I'll let them introduce themselves. So when they introduce themselves, I like to ask them also to tell their experience from the last 2 years, either from professional or from personal perspective, something really important to them. So first, John, could you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Alex. I'm John Kovac. I'm the director of Microsoft's manufacturing business unit here in the US, what we call the Midwest region. So I serve as part of what we call the US industry manufacturing team. I've been in supply chain and manufacturing and engineering systems for the past 20 plus years through my career, working for various software companies, as well as working for General Motors back in the day. So have a long experience in this area. Myself and my team consult with our clients and in their manufacturing and supply chain operations. We, with our platform technologies, as well as our supply chain, first moving supply chain technologies, along with our phenomenal partner solutions, we come to them with opportunities to help them better enable their operations by providing visibility and improving their manufacturing operations with different aspects of AI and ML programming and IoT adoption, et cetera. So essentially, I've spent the last 2 years working from home. You better like your wife and your family when you do that for 2 years straight. It's been a challenge, but it's been great. And in 2 years, I've seen a lot of companies that have essentially gone and had some difficulties with visibility into their supply chain and being adaptable. I think that's where technology can help, and that's where we need to help our clients develop that technology and that footprint so that they, in the next pandemic or the next challenge that comes up, which it's going to happen, it always does, that they're better enabled to adapt to whatever's coming down the road. So thank you, Alex.
Hi, Matt. Could you go ahead to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, John. And it's Matt Pedersen. I'm the Vice President at GEP in our supply chain consulting practice. A little bit more than 20 years of supply chain experience. First as a military logistician in the US Army, followed by some time in third-party logistics on the distribution management side, and then the last decade in supply chain consulting. And at GEP, our supply chain consulting team helps clients with large-scale transformations, as well as functionally specific projects, whether that be inventory, distribution, manufacturing, procurement, or planning. Similar to John, maybe for the last 2 years, spent an inordinate amount of time at home. And one of the takeaways for me, both professionally and personally, where there's been an intersection, is actually spending more time reading, which was something that I had gotten away from professionally, because there was always something else to invest time in. But the lack of travel and the time that availed itself to reading has been helpful. And I've spent a lot of time on business history books. which I think has been very helpful because right now we're in an environment where a lot of the situations and problems are new to us as supply chain practitioners, and they feel very unfamiliar, but they're not necessarily new problems. We in the business world have faced them time and again, but sometimes decades in the past. And I've been finding that reading and kind of getting in touch with some of our business history is a great way to remember some of the lessons learned and think about what can be applied in the world that we're living in today.
Wow, that's great, Matt. I believe you read tons of books in the past 2 years, and I believe many people in the audience probably did the same. What I found in the past 2 years, actually, amazingly, I think people, both as business or individual, actually have tremendous capability to adapt to the new environment. You know, coming up to what they need to do in this new environment, I think is fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, in the past couple of years, supply chain leaders experienced many major challenges, which they might not have experienced in the past. So Matt and John, let me ask you, in your view, what are the major challenges manufacturing leaders are experiencing today? And in what way it changed the life of supply chain leaders?
You know, as I see it, I mean, our manufacturing clients in North America are, I would say, a year to a year and a half behind. I don't know if you're seeing it, Matt, as well, but you're a year and a half behind as far as connecting equipment, getting data to flow, and then connecting all the various, types of data sets that they have in their enterprise. They're about a year and a half behind APAC, and then also in Europe, where Industry 4.0 started in Germany about a decade ago. So I enjoy my job from the aspect of helping to educate executives on exactly what they can do to catch up, because I want our manufacturers to be in the forefront of what's new and exciting in the world of technology, so that they can better enable their operations and become more effective and profitable in what they do. So.
No, I would agree with you, John. I think that we're experiencing with clients that there's a lot of deferred investment in this area. But the flip side is that there's now more tools, there are more options. Supply chain leaders are facing greater expectations. There's more stress. There's more unprecedented change. So I think what you're describing makes it an exciting and a stressful time to be a supply chain leader. And everything that we're doing now is front page news. And most of the strategies that drove the last 20 years of supply chain growth and complexity are up for debate. And probably to me, most importantly, the line between what constitutes supply chain, procurement, day-to-day operations, and customer service is blurred to the point where at times it's nearly indistinguishable, which is a tough situation to navigate as we live it in real time. But I think it's probably going to be a great opportunity in the long run, when the right tools and the right choices can be made to bring all of those components of the business in better alignment and concert with each other.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you look at the last bullet on the lower right, the 50%, I think that's higher now based on what's going on in Europe and the challenges that are happening over there with the start of the war. I think there's a big concern, and that deferred investment, especially in this area, especially in manufacturing, is going to be critical in the short term. So there's a lot of good statistics on this chart. I think they're very valid for what we're seeing day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. So next, Matt, let me ask you, with these challenges, right, how should supply chain leaders focus and do things differently, especially in the context of supply chain convergence?
Yeah, so at GEP, we think that convergence looks like successful digital ecosystem integration, which sounds very consulting-y and is certainly a mouthful. But honestly, we don't think the concepts are new. Just as I said, there are new tools that we have to bring convergence to life across the supply chain, to be inclusive of all stakeholders and external partners and suppliers and even consumers. And we think that the tools and the choices are new and they're better than ever before. And we have a quote here from an investor in the startup world. You don't have to believe history repeats itself, but you should accept that history rhymes. And I think that there's an important element of truth to that, that old ideas become new again. And one that we've spent a lot of time thinking about is this progression from vertical integration. So when we think back historically, even before the term supply chain existed, commercial enterprises were already organizing themselves around the idea that a corporation's integration and partnership along that flow of materials and processes mattered greatly in terms of efficiency and profitability. Vertical integration, which was popularized in the 1890s and the early 1900s, was that concept of organizing an entire corporation around the control of an end-to-end value chain. Obviously, the idea was so good that it proliferated. Steel wasn't even the origination of the strategy of vertical integration. The concept actually first was developed in the meat packing or protein supply chain. But then you saw other industries adopted as well. Oil and gas, telecommunications adopted vertical integration as a solution to managing supply and demand along really complex supply chains. And it helped them add predictability to operations and profitability. Despite supply chain fragmentation and government regulation throughout the 20th century, which broke apart a lot of these vertically integrated organizations, the desire to get the benefits of that vertically integrated structure has not disappeared. So why this history lesson on vertical and virtual integration? Well, because the demands on supply chains today and the concepts of the value of vertical integration are where we're coming back to. You know, we're progressing past supply chains as linear. We're progressing past supply networks as being a little more dynamic. We're passing supply ecosystems, which is the new language that is used most frequently, to this idea that companies want to be able to be a participant all along that vertically integrated ecosystem environment. But the way that you have to do that now, if you're not going to spend money on all the assets again, is through virtual integration and the opportunity to bring your entire supply organization, whether that's just your company or that's others, back into view. So we kind of call it, it's vertical integration with a twist. And that's the virtual integration that underlies kind of the supply chain convergence that we see today.
It's a very good history lessons and the visions into the future. So Matt, could you explain a little bit further what virtual integration really is and how it's going to define supply chain in the future?
Yeah, we think to define virtual integration, the first thing we have to define is what does success look like for supply chain leaders. And when we look at what's being asked of supply chain leaders today, we characterize it in three interdependent areas. The first, customer delight, we define through meeting the consumer objectives of excellent availability, wide or customizable assortment, low cost, and great service. The last couple of years have underscored in the most dramatic way the second requirement, which is resiliency. That is the durability of supply chain team. If you can advance the slide, Alex.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep. And then the third requirement in delivering the first two is supporting the growing expectations from corporations, from investors, from society of supply chains being more, supply chains having a greater positive impact on our environment and on the social governance that surrounds the execution of our work. And so these three asks of supply chain leaders, these three areas of success that are desired, have some real specific overlaps that John and I are going to talk about. The first is visibility, and bringing to the surface what it is that a supply chain leader needs to be able to see to make decisions. The second is collaboration and what a supply chain leader can do. The third is innovation and supply chain leaders pushing the envelope to be able to consistently improve and make the right investments in their supply chain. And we think excellent supply chains and excellent supply chain leaders need to be great in visibility, collaboration, and innovation, which is what is going to allow them to be virtually integrated.
Absolutely. Matt, you mentioned resiliency here. I think it's such a critical mission for supply chain to succeed in the next phase. This is also confirmed by actually many research and surveys done in the past couple of years. For example, GEP actually sponsored a survey conducted by HBR, Harvard Business Review, and it found that it was done last year, and it found that leaders from lower performing organizations actually put cost and efficiency as their top priority, while the highest performing organizations actually put resiliency on the top. So here is an important question, right? We need to probably discuss next is what supply chain leaders should do to foster virtual integration. And as you said, visibility and collaboration, right? I think those are absolutely foundational for resiliency. But from what I have seen across different industries, it has been quite difficult to accomplish this visibility and collaboration due to cultural, process, and technology issues. In a recent Gartner 2022 report, right, it said 79% of large organizations are now focusing on being more resilient, and 83% of organizations saying that they are, putting a lot of effort to have better supply ecosystem visibility. This is their top priority. So, and I think on this slide, we can ask you to continue to discuss how these elements actually being done in the environment.
I think to pick up on your note, Alex, the first critical need is visibility. That's the foundation by which true collaboration can be achieved. The need to have true visibility into potential disruptions across the end-to-end value chain, and not just a company's internal supply chain, but the chain that exists with suppliers through customers is paramount. That real-time visibility, whether that's into contract manufacturers, multiple tiers of suppliers, distribution, retail partners, that's the differentiator between a company that can be responsive and resilient and one that's going to be challenged by our new normal. But it's not easy to do.
No, and once, what I've seen, several customers have done this, as once they have that visibility, once they've started collecting the data, they then think of new concepts and new innovative ideas that they can potentially create another business unit from all that data. One example is Sandvik Coromant. They're a manufacturer of tools and drill bits. It's a 120-plus-year-old company that makes tool bits. It's like, how much more boring can you get? It's essentially drills and tools for lathes and machine mills, etc. They had yellow jackets. These were 40-year veterans at the company who walked around the plant floor with yellow jackets, and they understood simply by walking past a machine if it needed some kind of an adjustment based on their years of experience. So they had also incorporated a lot of sensor data onto and IoT devices onto the machinery that they were manufacturing, sending that data to a central hub. And then they thought of ideas of how can we gather the knowledge of those 40-year veterans? Because as we all know, manufacturing companies are having trouble attracting new workers, younger workers to the workforce for manufacturing. So they essentially took that knowledge and put it into an AI model combined with data from IoT sensor devices. And they created a new business, which essentially said, okay, we're going to sell, call it Cummins Engine in Indiana. This is a company based in Europe, don't forget. We're going to sell Cummins this new lathe machine, and we're going to monitor that machine remotely on the behalf of Cummins. And we can sense when, based on the algorithms, based on the AI model, based on all the sensor data, we can sense when that customer needs a new drill bit or needs a new piece of equipment swapped out, maybe a new motor based on the vibration that they're sensing or the heat buildup. And we'll send a tech out to do that adjustment to that machine remotely. And based on that, they're able to create a new product, a new division that drives profit to the company. And they're able to gather that knowledge from people who are leaving the building and put it into the AI model. And so they've developed a new business unit based on that. So it's a pretty phenomenal way to use technology, sensor data, IoT devices, and AI with the personal touch of people and their knowledge in their heads to build a new business and innovative model to go to market.
Excellent point, John. So visibility, collaboration, and innovation are the new competency currencies for the best supply chain teams in the future. But that really leaves that one gap that brings it all together. And that's where we return to virtual integration. That is to say, the connecting of all of the different activities along a supply flow. Because if there were no restrictions on capital to solve for improving collaboration, visibility, and end-to-end value chain innovation would probably just be a return to vertical integration. However, there are restrictions on capital, and in most cases, you're not going to see a tilt back towards true vertical integration, which leaves us and you with the imperative to design your supply chain team, structure, and capability investments with the intent of becoming great at virtual integration.
Very well said, Matt. In today's supply chain environment, constraints coupled with constant disruptions impose huge challenges to supply chain leaders. And supply chain convergence, particularly vertical integration, is the trend in those who are leading ahead of others. So John, I know Microsoft has a fascinating story in transforming its manufacturing operations. Could you tell us about it?
Sure, I appreciate that. Yeah, we have our contract manufacturer located in China. You'll see some of the stats on this slide. It's a separate business organization that makes our Xbox HoloLens, Surface laptops, Surface hubs. Again, it's a contract manufacturer. At any given time, we have about 500 Microsoft employees sitting out on the floor. Engineering, we have a whole group of engineers that are stationed there. We own all the capital equipment. Prior to about 5 years ago, go to the next slide. Prior to about 5 years ago, we were operating the entire operation essentially in Excel and PowerPoint. That's the way we displayed the data, right? So it's historic data. Everyone knows you look at Excel, it's historic point in time. PowerPoint equally is so. I'm sure you can write algorithms that essentially can tie it to current data, but it's still not the same as really looking at Power BI screens with data collated from various sources at the same point. What we found was data was everywhere, different silos, different databases. And this came true because of what happened when the leader of the group, our corporate vice president, came into the supply chain operations unit and basically said, look, there's a customer complaint on this laptop. The Surface Book laptop. I want to know the history and the makeup of that laptop. Take a look at the BOM. Who supplied the material components? Where did they come from? When did those components arrive? What line was this unit built on? Who were the operators that put it together? Who shipped it out? Which retail store sold it? And finally, what was the customer experience like when they had this complaint? When they said something was wrong? So as a manufacturer, you have to realize there's so much going into the generation and buildup of anything that you manufacture, we have the same problem. We use SAP as a backbone. My understanding is we're one of the largest users of SAP over a 27-year history in the world. So it's a large implementation of SAP. And essentially, we came to the conclusion that it's not a way to run an $8 to $9 billion enterprise. It's a large business in and of its own. So after this, go to the next slide. After this internal analysis, we just found out that we really, along with other reasons, we needed to make a shift to an all digital manufacturing organization. So we began that analysis, and you take a look at this chart, and you look at what we build. There's a lot of pricing and margin pressures. There's low prices, thin margins on any kind of a computer unit that you want to build. Google builds a $200 laptop. Apple builds a premium $2,000+ laptop, and we're somewhere in the middle essentially. We have to run our business, as I mentioned, as a separate standard P&L center, as a separate company, without funding from the mothership. So there are increasing customer service expectations in the white glove service area of what you consider a laptop, for example. The era of free shipping, same day delivery, liberal return policies, that all affects us, right? And the ability to serve our customers is primary and paramount to our mission. So product quality is imperative. If you got 80 million ships, or 80 million units rather, you need to ship and distribute globally. How do you visualize 80 million units and that amount of information consistently? How do you see that information? How do I see the makeup and all the raw materials going into the factory, producing those units? How do I see all the units on the way out of the factory through the various channels via sea or air to the various distribution and sales points around the world? It's difficult. There's a lot of data there. And they're sort of, in what we do, they're shortened product life cycles. So you might start a unit in 0 to 3 months as engineering and design, 3 to 6 months, 6 months to 9 months is roughly manufacturing. And then you've got about 6 months or so to sell it. Then you got to go and build the next one. So as we all know, that's complicated. So we tell our customers, and this is how we did it, get connected. We sent a team of 5 to 6 supply chain experts in this group within our manufacturing operation to China. We took a look at it. We said, okay, we've done all these Kaizen events, lean manufacturing. We've got black belts galore at Microsoft. We've used these in ways to get efficiencies and get the margins as high as we could. But essentially, we now needed to transform more. So what data do we have? What data do we have to work with? Take a look at our information coming off of one assembly line. What are our yields? What does the quality look like? What's the incoming material flow look like? What do the repair lines for those units look like? And so we said, okay, let's take a look at that data and send it to Azure, send it into the cloud where we can start dissecting it. From there, we rebuilt all the management reports. We essentially had to take away Excel and PowerPoint from plant management and from executive management, because that's the way they were used to running the business. So IT shut it off, and essentially they were forced to use Power BI to run the operation and to look at exacting real-time data flow of information. Just by having visibility to various data sets, we're able to find millions of dollars in scrap savings immediately. We didn't have that visibility before. So after the first 5-6 week sprint, we came back for another 6-week sprint. This time we looked at process data. This is what we suggest for our clients to do. Look at process data. Vibration, temperature, pressure, positional data. But that's where you need to get more, discerning about the data that you've got. You got to spend more time with statistics and data grading. And that's where you start combining different data sets. We're talking about this in this whole webinar around taking supply chain data, combining it with some of your manufacturing data, and maybe look at some of your ERP data and start to combine those data sets and really start to get insights. And that's where you become cognitive. We started implementing machine learning to detect anomalies and patterns and to further improve our supply chain. And here's kind of what it looks like. Today, we're connected not only to our primary factory, but we've connected to raw material suppliers, tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. We've connected to their database systems. We've had to bring in our supply chain and procurement rather folks to re-engineer the contracts between our suppliers and us, and to illustrate to them why that we're doing this, that we want visibility to their data. We have implemented direct links to our engineering and PLM systems, and now we're tied into everything. So when there's a hiccup somewhere in the system and a customer complains, engineering knows it, and they know that maybe they need to make an engineering change to the next version of whatever that unit is. So once all that data is in the cloud and Azure in this example, we start to do some really interesting things by incorporating a lot of other data sets. Like go to the next slide. This is where it gets kind of cool. So some of the Power BI reports that you see here coming out of the system, we even incorporated some various NOAA, National Oceanographic Administration data to understand the shipping lanes and where our boats are in transit in the next slide. And then from there, we can even now tie it down to the SKU level. So if you look and you see a SKU here of a certain unit, we know exactly where that is in transit anywhere around the world. And with the NOAA data overlaid on top of the shipping lanes, we now know exactly if there's a typhoon somewhere off the coast of the APAC region, we know if it's going to affect in transit the timing of the delivery of that item. So this requires, the next slide, it requires a large number of data sources, right? It's no joke. And we've actually, our supply chain planners used to do a lot of planning. They don't do planning anymore. They were working on exceptions. In year 2 of incorporating more AI, they actually were working only on exceptions, but we're now so confident in year 3 of our AI that our supply chain planners don't work on exceptions anymore. The AI does that. So what the returns are pretty phenomenal to the organization. I'm not allowed to say numbers, but they're in the 9-figure range and above. And you can see them here. One more click there, Alex. And here's within the first week, the first month, the first half, meaning 6 months of implementing this technology and these components. We've increased yield, reduced scrap, reduced rework, etc. And then after year 1, and I've already illustrated years 2 and years 3. So we're on year 5, don't forget. But you have to start somewhere. And you start by becoming connected, incorporating that data and start getting visibility to the data, combining it with other data sets, then you get cognitive. So there are definite steps along the way. This is how all of our customers do it. I think we're beyond, Matt, the stage of doing proof of concepts, POCs on, okay, let's see if this machine, and we can do a predictive maintenance on one machine. People know this stuff works. They know that by combining the data sets that they can get there, and you achieve phenomenal returns when you do it. So I think there's enough data points out there to illustrate the positive.
I think that's awesome, John, and it's a great illustration of what we were talking about, of being able to bring all of those parts together, and to be able to create that thread that connects all of them and allows the Microsoft team to look at their supply chain truly end to end and know what all of the impact points are along the way, regardless of whether that's internal to your organization or that's with a partner.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it's a fascinating story from Microsoft. You know, manufacturing traditionally being viewed as back office in the back, right? But now when you use, data actually tie all these activities together, create this virtual integration, what you create is that customer experience, right? Really the customer-centric experience that give you such an edge to be successful in the market. So I think supply chain definitely coming more forefront with this virtual integration. So I want to further discuss a very important aspect of collaboration. We need to know that the purpose of a good visibility, obviously we talk a lot about great visibility, but if only you have good visibility, which is not translated into action or collaboration, by itself is not much value. It could even bring you into a panic mode simply because you see disruptions coming but you don't know what to do about it, right? So collaboration itself is a familiar topic in supply chain, but we have seen from this pandemic, because of constant disruptions, the very virtual work environment, remote work environment, and also the requirement for agility. This collaboration becoming more and more important, and more specifically, is the operationalizing collaboration is very important for resiliency. But without good process and technology framework around it, collaboration can only be a strategy and maybe just a talk, right? So what we believe here at GEP is that collaboration with suppliers and your ecosystem partners, contract manufacturers, need to be done in a holistic way. And that's the only way that you can build resiliency. If you can see on the screen on the left-hand side, right, starting from the 11 o'clock position and counterwise, this includes PO collaboration, purchase order collaboration, forecast collaboration, capacity collaboration, and cost collaboration, inventory collaboration, quality collaboration, all these collaboration together, not only with the tier 1 suppliers, but also tier 2, tier 3, and multi-tier suppliers. What we are doing here, really in the supply chain, right? We are connecting the very source side, with suppliers, right, from sourcing, contract, right, all the way down to customer or delivery. And when you do that with real-time collaboration, real-time data coming in, as John mentioned, the data come in when you do this with multiple tiers, and you can track supply chain, via accurate data, right? And also respond to disruptions with configurable workflows and exception management. All these things coming together give tremendous lever to supply chain professionals to be successful in this disruptive environment. All right, we've talked many points and many great points. And now I'd like to have John and Matt, discuss a little bit further if you have anything to add in this takeaway slide.
We're in the world of cloud, edge, virtual integration, digital twin technologies. There's a lot of things being thrown at manufacturers and supply chain experts and executives. But all these technologies essentially enable companies to create a digital twin of their entire supply chain. That's kind of what we're talking about here, including your facilities, processes, and people. And these technologies are making this possible now. So the manufacturers are increasingly adopting autonomous capabilities that can understand these events, understand the relationships between them, and prioritize which one they want to do one over another or go to market first with based on different parameters. Supply chain solutions now integrate with external data sources. I spoke to that earlier in Microsoft's examples around geopolitical or weather-related events, for example. Also supplier risk. I have a close friend of mine who has a company in Michigan here who essentially does supplier risk analytics. So you as a manufacturer can now understand all your supply base, and if there's a fire in one of them, for example, do you have another supplier that can pick up the slack quickly? So whatever might happen, and you can mitigate those risks. These new capabilities are bringing unprecedented intelligence to your enterprise and predictive power that you didn't have before. So you need to take advantage of it. For example, Daimler Trucks North America, a great company, has gained new visibility into their supply chains across multiple tiers of suppliers. Near real-time data allows them to assess the risks and mitigate problems before they lead to disruption. It can also enrich its own supply chain data with external sources like global weather, as I mentioned earlier, to better understand the impact on shipments and, excite their customers and make their customers and customers happy. So I think that's kind of my synopsis of what's going on here, Matt.
No, I 100% agree. And I was thinking as you were talking, one of the things that I liked about kind of the story you told of Microsoft's journey is that you provided a time frame for those that are listening to us, that you're in year 5 of a journey where Microsoft has been building and creating these capabilities along the way, which are now realistic options for other companies, right? That it's not going to be the flip of a switch, but hopefully not a 5-year journey for companies either. But there's been so much progress that has been made with new technologies and new capabilities that really the challenge is coming up with the plan on how to deploy them and identify the kind of the critical first areas for data collection and what companies want to use and do with this information to truly create, I like your description of this digital thread that runs all the way across end to end in the supply chain or the supply ecosystem, but that brings the pieces together, because that's exactly what we see as that's the backbone for virtual integration, right? And so could not agree more with your optimism about the opportunities, but know that it's a big first step. And I go almost back to the beginning that we talked about. There's been a lot of deferred investment as supply chain leaders globally have been fighting fires for the last 2 years.
Right.
But as we collectively kind of bring our eyes back to the horizon and look forward, the investments in these areas that you've described and the journey that Microsoft went on is exactly where people are going to have to focus, not only because it's a good thing to do for stable supply chains, but this is what's going to make the next series of unpredictable challenges in the supply chain world more manageable in the future.
Good point. Good point. I don't think a 5-year journey is. I think based on our learnings and other companies' learnings and where we're at and the technology improvements, as you mentioned, I think that time is now shortened dramatically.
Absolutely.
So getting the market and doing this faster is much more available for our customers for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We're having a very different new set of challenges. And I think this is the time for supply chain leaders to act and really to thrive, be very different. So this has been a great conversation and discussion. Thank you very much, John and Matt. Next, we'll have a Q&A time. And again, audience, please type in your questions in the chat space. We'll have the speakers answer those questions. We've got some couple questions here, and as a reminder, audience, you can enter your questions in the Q&A box where you see Ask Questions. I'll give a couple seconds for you to do that, but in the meantime, let's go with the current questions I have in the queue. So I guess the first one. Okay, let me read the question. So Microsoft did a great job transforming this one. Hold on. Yeah, did a great job transforming supply chain. And you guys did a great job on the webinar. Some really good information that will be applicable to my business. How do we begin? You mentioned manufacturing, supply chain, digital thread, connecting all your various departments. I'm having trouble just getting production out of the door and putting fires away today. How do you suggest we start? And I guess that's a fantastic question for John.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a good way to begin the conversation. I think you kind of look at where your problems exist and where they start. You build a business case and say, okay, here's what our goals are. Here's what our end result is that we want to develop for the business. Here's the potential ROI. So then you kind of look at what are your best practices are from an IT/OT perspective. So don't forget, I mean, this is not only an IT problem, right? It's a challenge between both groups. You know, a friend of mine who was an executive director of advanced manufacturing at an auto supplier transformed in the end 28 plants globally on the behalf of his company. They started with two people, himself and another gentleman, on one assembly line, and they connected it. It's the same as the Microsoft story, right? And from there, it expanded, right? What was the ROI on that one assembly line? What was the yield improvement? What was the quality improvement? What was the throughput improvement to increase production, to increase sales? So you take that ROI figure from that one line, you develop the case then for the next set, whatever that next problem is. In that case, they went and did the entire plant. And so in the end, you use one project to develop the ROI for the next one, and use that funding, that savings, to develop the funding for the next project. And it kind of rolls and it streamlines into the next journey that you're on. In the end, they had, I think, around 75, 80 people on their entire group, a combination of OT and IT and finance, working together to transform different plants around the world. So that's kind of the way it starts. That's the way the journey runs. You run into challenges as you go, but you work through them. I would say getting the data from the different silos that you have around the organization, different data stores, different types of data into one data store, is probably the hardest part of this journey that you're going to uncover. But once you get there, once you get it straight, and then data starts flowing, and you get it right, that's when you start seeing real improvements.
Great, John. I like that approach. That's kind of a step-by-step, right? I guess in today's environment, we have to be agile, just get things started, and maybe fail fast and progress, right? So I think that's a fantastic perspective. I guess we have the next question. Let me read the question. In the last couple of years, we've discovered that a lot of our supply chain challenges don't sit within our operations. The constraints are with suppliers and other providers. How does this help? How does this help with that problem? And I think probably Matt, you are the one to answer this one.
Sure. Thank you, Alex. And I like how the question is phrased a little bit. I think in our role as consultants working with clients, and probably those folks listening can appreciate that, for every challenge you see with a supplier, or a challenge that you an issue you have with a customer, maybe there's a customer somewhere complaining about you, or a supplier that's confused about the choices that your company might be making. And what I think is underscored in this approach, and John's example of Microsoft was a great example, that the intent is collaboration fully end-to-end, not just end-to-end in an enterprise, but end-to-end in a supply chain the way a customer sees it, from themselves all the way back to the source. They don't think about the individual segmentations where different companies start and stop. They think about a complete supply chain, and that's what would encourage everyone here to do. In fact, a lot of the projects that we have been working on really since the start of COVID, and even before, we're starting to see more projects where we have two clients that are partners, whether they're channel partners or it's a supplier and a manufacturer, perhaps, where both companies are clients, and we're working on a project together between the three organizations, looking for ways to better collaborate. And it almost always goes back to shared data, shared visibility, and the tools that now exist to be able to do that across enterprise is really the differentiator, whether those are cloud solutions to be able to share data environments, to be able to do joint analysis and have common visibility, or now with platforms like GEP Next and others that allow for visibility and collaboration across ERP systems, and really start to drive that connectivity. But the new question that you need to be asking yourself is, what can you share with your partners in your supply chain, in your supply ecosystem, and what can you do in concert with each other to improve versus, how do I tell a supplier to solve my problems for me?
Great, Matt. I think what we've seen, right, the network ecosystem perspective, as you said, is really a major trend today in supply chain. And I think the challenge is how to share information, how to collaborate. And I think information sharing is difficult. And if you look at not only sharing some transactional information, but for example, forecast information has to share in confidence, right? I think that those are the challenges that supply chain organizations are facing more. So you definitely need to have the right technology platform and the right process built for that purpose. That's great. And let's continue. And one more time, reminder, participants, please send in your question in the console so that we can get some time to answer. The next question, so it says, getting data all together is very powerful. In the Microsoft transformation journey, what was your biggest challenge and lessons learned in implementing the integration? So I guess that's a question about getting data together. It's obviously a challenge. So John, what would you share with the audience about the challenges in getting data? I think you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, I do. I believe our challenges were similar to many of our clients, right? We have, similar to you guys, data in different silos, different formats, different systems. Normalizing that data and all those disparate data sets takes time and effort. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's not an easy thing, but it pays off in spades down the road. Once you have that data in one source from all those different data sources, if you will, then I think you can do some really cool things with it. So I would say data normalization was probably the biggest challenge. And then to do that, if you're going out to the supply base, we're out to tier 2 right now. I think we're approaching tier 3, but that's another challenge. And we Matt just spoke about it, but we have to get our procurement people involved with restructuring some of those contracts into our supply base so we could get access to that data. And that's not easy either. Some of them don't want to necessarily relinquish it, but you're just looking at certain data sets that relate only to what they provide to you as the OEM. But getting visibility into the supply chain for that data is critical.
Great, John. The next question is about ROI. So is any tips on how to show the ROI of your internal transformation journey in an outsourced manufacturing environment when the main visible costs are just the turnkey product costs? I think, John, if you can take that, it's an ROI question on the journey.
I don't know if I can specifically comment to turnkey product costs, but I think the ROI I was mentioning earlier of I think in general of a manufacturer would be something that might be viable here, but essentially is taking the ROI from one project and what is the return based on what finance is helping you with determining that, whether it's increased throughput or increased quality or decreased downtime. And you can put metrics on that. And once you do that, you can develop an ROI picture for that one area, that one assembly line, that one area of your procurement and supply sourcing area. And from there, you can use that savings and parlay that into the next project. So I don't know, Matt, if you have any other tips on that, but that's something that I would think would be important.
Matt, are you on mute? Okay, we can come back. We can circle back. So let's move on to the next question. The next question is the participant says, I like the holistic collaboration concept. Is there a particular order we need to consider in adopting this approach? I don't think we have data with good quality today. I think I'll probably speak a little bit about the question. So it is really a flexible approach to build this holistic collaboration, and it really depend on what your current business environment needs, right? And so you can start anywhere. And in terms of data quality, in the GEP solution that we have a master data management, that is a very important place to start to standardizing and synchronizing data, right? So what's behind the collaboration system or the collaboration solution is data actually built on a solid foundation. And also, data cleansing services that's on top of it can help the users, move into this environment, right, in the adoption and the deployment phase. Okay, I think these are pretty much the question. Anything, either John or Matt, you want to add?
Matt, you want to add?
I think from my.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
No, go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Aaron, appreciate the time that everyone has invested with us today, and hopefully folks have availed themselves to some of the resources that are available. And certainly, I think I can speak for all of us that our contact information is readily accessible on LinkedIn. We look forward to connecting.
And I think I agree with you, Matt. I appreciate the time, and it's been a fun project. I think everybody just needs to start and dip your toe in the water and start moving. I think the era of POCs around, I don't know, take a piece of equipment on your shop floor and you want to do predictive maintenance on it. I think the era of POCs are done. People know this stuff works. All of this technology and all of the things that you want to do is out there, and other companies are doing it and accelerating. So every day you wait, you're in my opinion, getting behind the curve. So just jump in, start, get some assistance, work with great companies like GEP and others, and just kick it off and start moving.
Thanks, John. I think that's a fantastic tip to end today's webinar. I think, yeah, definitely we encourage audience, right, business leaders and supply chain leaders move ahead in this very disruptive environment. Now, I want to thank our speakers, both John and Matt, being a very insightful speaker today, and thank everyone in the audience for joining us today. I hope you find some good insights and value from today's discussion, and I hope this conversation we can continue, right? As a resource for all of you, there are a few papers in the content section, so you can find this in the resource tab in the console. And once again, thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe and well.